So, I really like episode 3 of Legend of the Galactic Heroes. In fact, it may be my favorite episode of the series so far. I know that's a funny thing to say considering I've only reviewed 2 other episodes, but I really liked how different this episode was from the ones preceding it. Gone are the high-flying and epic space battles, replaced instead with a grittier look at the day-to-day realities of life in a war-ravaged alliance. This is an episode that strips away the veneer of democracy and shows us the ugliness of the pseudo-dictatorial rule lurking underneath. What does this remind me of? I don't know. Nothing comes to mind. Anyways, welcome dear viewer to the third video in our 110 long episode journey into one of my favorite all-time pieces of fiction. This is The Birth of the 13th Fleet. So buckle your seatbelts, bust out the tea and brandy, and let's get into it. This episode is structured in a pretty straightforward way. We have 3 arcs working to articulate that all is not well in the heart of the Alliance. Republican democracy is a myth, or at the very least the version of Republican democracy that we see in the Alliance is a far cry from the ideal image of Republican democracy we have in our heads. Wait a minute, this seems kind of familiar. Nah, I must be crazy. Okay, so the first arc is basically set up, in addition to having probably the most iconic moment of the series so far. This arc introduces the neoconservative ideology that reigns supreme among the majority of the elite and military classes within the Alliance. This freedom-flavored opium is peddled by leaders of the Alliance to dope their subjects. It's a drug. It justifies ongoing war efforts while the citizenry is left shouldering the mounting costs of protracted conflict with the Empire. Where have I seen that before? Its logical core is built on a mountain of politically expedient lies and moral hypocrisies. Oh, that's right, now I remember.
The rise and spread of the QAnon conspiracy.
I understand they like me very much.
Okay, so this scene. I love this scene. First, we have Yang's bitterly sarcastic color commentary of the memorial service for all of the fallen soldiers in the background. The main protagonist, the admiral who kept the Battle of Astarte from being a total loss, the person whose eyes were meant to see this part of the story through. Yeah, he's just shitting on this entire thing. He's pointing out the artificiality of the ceremony at all turns, gesturing at the lack of care elites have for the soldiers present and their families, needling away at the sophistry and affectation of the master of ceremonies. And what a master of ceremonies he is, delivering one long rhetorical circle jerk about why it's so glorious for other people to sacrifice their lives for the noble cause of the nation or some shit like that. Anyways, shortly after contradicting himself mid-speech when he says people in the Alliance are allowed to, but strongly discouraged from opposing national policy, Daddy Job is interrupted by our queen, Jessica Edwards. Jessica, yes, you heard me, Jessica, lures him into a trap with some honeyed words. She then eviscerates this avatar of hypocrisy, pointing out that it's bold of you to assume that your family doesn't need to die while mine does. And so, in a charming moment, she's lovingly embraced by a crowd of critical thinkers moved by her candor, logical reasoning, and emotional appeals. Just kidding, she's kicked out of the auditorium, gaslighted by Job, and treated like a black sheep among the unthinking, cynical, or complacent masses. Act 2. This is where things get spicy. As Jessica is kicked out of the memorial service, a chorus of military members and their friends and family erupt into singing the Alliance's national anthem, Liberty Bell, a song praising the ideals of liberty and freedom for which the Alliance purportedly stands. Shortly thereafter, we get a deeper look into just how distant these ideals are from the realities of life in the capital city. Almost immediately after leaving, Jessica is assaulted by a band of paramilitaries called the Patriotic Knights Corps. These bozos threaten to beat her to death for sedition as they in turn hum Liberty Bell. This has to be one of the most chilling scenes of the anime so far. It visually shows the disparity between the nation's ideals and some of the people who most proclaim to uphold them by way of hyperbole and leitmotif. Coercive actions are rationalized in private life by rhetorical appeals to the national interest, while the meaning behind these words is literally stripped from the national anthem in a way that figuratively harkens back to the scene we just witnessed of obedient citizens singing the very same song to the tune of Job Trunick's words. Luckily, our boy Dusty Attenborough comes to the rescue before Jessica is beaten to a pulp. What follows is a series of chase scenes culminating in a final epic showdown at Commodore Yang's crib. Just kidding, these PK fools lob grenades at Yang's house and try to force him and his party to surrender, but are promptly embarrassed by Yang's skillful use of the fire hoses built into his home and by the arrival of the fire department shortly thereafter. We get a bit of criticism levied by Yang against bystanders more concerned with their safety than with protecting the lives and civil liberties of their fellow citizens, and some sharp comments directed at the fire department whose prompt response is attributed to political rather than physical damage control, and then the situation moves towards a resolution. Act 3. So yes, of course, the resolution is arrived at through some good old-fashioned arm twisting when Admiral Yang confronts Daddy Job with his knowledge of the circumstances behind the ties he has to the PKC. Basically, they're Daddy Job's personal death squad and private militia. With little to no choice but to acknowledge Yang's cunning threats to expose his relationship to the PKC, Job calls off his guard dogs. He then turns to some old-fashioned twisting of the military-industrial complex to position Yang in a life-or-death situation by pushing for his assignment to a suicide mission to capture Iserlorn Fortress. Thus, Jessica is saved and the 13th Fleet is born, all through the abuse of private office for public gain. Yay! Corruption! Thanks everybody, see you next time.